Welcome, and it's the Redbird Reboot. I'm Blake Murphy, joined by my co-host at Pancake Soul, Marcus Labrada, and we've got us joining special guest today, Tyler Vasquez himself, big, if not the person of the Bird Gang Travel Club, huge Cardinals fan, great analysis of the team as well for the most part. Tyler, happy to have you on today, and appreciate you jumping on. It was a little bit last minute, I know, but glad to talk some Cards football with you.
No, I'm pumped, guys. This will be fun. On what's been kind of a not so fun season.
Yeah, no. Tell me about it. Arizona Cardinals come into this week with a 1-6 record, with the news that Kyler Murray is officially not been activated today. The team has moved, I believe, Elijah Wilkinson, their previously starting offensive guard, to IR, promoted wide receiver Andre Bocelli, and we are here to break down a game against a team that is pretty daunting in the Baltimore Ravens. We'll have a bit more on that, I think, partway through our show, but as we kind of get started, at least, Tyler, what have been some of your thoughts so far from what we've seen in this kind of painful but also expected season from the Arizona Cardinals, who unfortunately for Suns fans and for Diamondbacks fans, the rest of the Valley, we've had kind of a little bit of losing streak that's gone on. Cardinals have been at the center of that despite having the lowest expectations. What have you seen so far from this new regime as they've gone out and played hard, but it has not turned into wins?
You know, I've been excited for what you just said, that they've played hard. You know what I mean? When they've come out every game, they've looked compared to times at last season, they've looked like they've been prepared to play. They look like they know what they're doing. They're not making crazy mistakes. It's just not having enough talent on the field, right? I mean, they're just out talented when it comes to playing these other teams. They're just bottom of the barrel in the NFL, and it starts at quarterback. I mean, Josh Dobbs is great for what he is. I mean, he's a backup quarterback, and if you needed him to come fill in for a couple of games, that's great. But starting your season and having to play 6, 7, 8, 9 games, which is what it looks like it's gonna be.
Yeah.
It's caught up to him. He's now on film, and people see what his tendencies are, and now it looks like the Cardinals have checked over to get the ball out of his hands fast, do little dump offs, do the things that we used to see in the Cliff Kingsbury era with Dobbs. And, luckily he can make some things happen with his feet occasionally, and that's made things fun. But ultimately, what I've liked about the season is exactly what you started off with is they fight. It doesn't look like anyone is going out there like, we don't have a chance to win. They play hard. And that's what you want to see out of this team, and get kind of an idea of what players do you want around long term. And I think you're starting to see glimmers of, oh, this guy looks good, and maybe he can be here long term, and maybe this guy will be good. I mean, Dennis Gardeck, he was pretty much a rotational guy for a long time, and now he's leading your team in sacks. And you look at him as like, oh, well, he's a great piece that we need to keep around. So, that's been the glimmer of hope of this season.
Definitely agree, at least. Marcos, you've had some time at least to look back on some of the season. What are some of the biggest takeaways that you've had, not just maybe from the season in general, but just from where the team is right now? Because like Tyler says, they're at least going out there and putting effort on the field, something that did feel like it was lacking at the end of 2022. It's kind of where it was kind of time to get a fresh set of faces in there. Are we seeing enough that gives confidence moving forward, or is that going to be confidence we're going to have to see with Kyler Murray coming back and maybe the defense putting together more performances like they did against Seattle on Sunday?
Yeah, they need to be more consistent, especially on the defensive end. They've been kind of up and down for the season. Started out strong, and then they were just getting rolled over by teams that were just thinking about hey, we're just going to run the ball, and these guys that can't stop the run and whatnot on offense. It's just going to be what we can see coming from the system and what is going to be adapting to what Kyler Murray is going to do. And I'd like to say something about the screen passes to Tyler. Anybody who wanted Sean Payton as our head coach, the guys, I think the Broncos are like 5th in screen passes, using Russell Wilson as this person who's just throwing behind the sticks and behind the line of scrimmage. So I guess we kind of dodged a bullet when it came to like what Sean Payton would have done in this Cardinals organization with Kyler Murray, because it just seems like everything would have been horizontal anyways, with a few passes deep and whatnot.
I'm glad we didn't end up with Sean Payton now. I mean, if go looking back on it, right? I was on that train as well. Like, let's get Sean Payton here. Let's make the splashy move. But you see what JG has done, and he's kind of put some life, although a little awkward in press conferences. He's put some life into this team.
Yeah, I agree. At the very least, I would say that I would want to see more like emotion on the sidelines. There's times where like the camera pans on him, and I was talking about this when we had our whole when we had when we had Joe and we had Walter on the stream. That like all you see is him just crossing his arms on the sideline, just looking like as if nothing's phasing him. Even if like there was a situation where a ref could have missed the call, instead of getting all animated and pissed off on the sideline, trying to get into the referee's like face and tell him like what the hell kind of call was that? He's just standing there. So I want to see more animation, but at the very least, I do agree that like this team is at putting better effort than what we've seen before.
No, I agree, and I think going back to the Sean Payton area, for me, it wasn't even just Sean Payton, but it was what was being advertised was you're going to get Sean Payton, and you weren't going to get Dennis Allen because he was still going to be with the Saints, and that was kind of a former head coach, experienced guy. You weren't going to get him. It was being advertised as Sean Payton and Vic Fangio as the defensive coordinator, a guy who pretty much every team ever since he played the Rams with the Chicago Bears as their defensive coordinator against Jared Goff in that Super Bowl year. People just looked at his two high safeties, being able to still keep a player down in the box to be able to help with the run game and being able to apply pressure. It just kind of broke that McVay-Shanahan model of offense, and teams have been chasing that ever since. So that was what was advertised, was you get a really great play caller, offensive guru, and get this elite defensive guy on the other side. We've seen that can work. What we've really kind of seen with Sean Payton so far is he's come in, and Russell Wilson has actually like kind of returned to like the rest that we've expected. It's not been completely inept, but we have seen Vance Joseph, and he's got worse, it seems, after leaving the Cardinals. They're seemingly trying to run a defense that he's not as familiar with. In that case, it's kind of like that 2019 Cardinals defense, in which every time that it felt like the offense was going to score, the defense was about to give up like a 95, 99-yard drive back the other way for 6. And it's a place of where what we kind of expected, we're thinking of Sean Payton coming as the savior, hasn't really lived up to the expectations. Now, as far as Jonathan Gannon and company go, they've somewhat overachieved, to your point, Tyler, of the press conferences, the expectations being low. We saw this team be able to put up a fight and keep a lot of teams in check, even the Seahawks, through 3.5 quarters last week. They just have not been able to make those clutch plays to be able to win the game, whether it's on the offensive side or, in some cases, getting burned by a receiver just with a pretty low talent cornerback room, which is something that, of course, is going to take time. It is a place of though where I think a lot of people would have said, if you had looked at how much we'd have had to give up for Sean Payton, like imagine saying, hey, we traded all this for Sean Payton, we gave him this huge contract, and we still have Vance Joseph here as the defensive coordinator. Oh, and by the way, at least like the defense that he's coaching now has gotten worse. Something has just gone awry. Instead, it feels like there's a lot more optimism for Arizona Cardinals, specifically built around maybe not even the talent, but this coaching staff and the ability to evaluate talent that we've at least seen through some of the rookie players and GM Monty Ossenfort.
Yeah, one thing you hit on was that this team, how they've been performing in terms of how many games, like I don't have the number, but I know I've heard it. It's like 4 or 5 games they've gone into half leading, right? And I think maybe one of the more alarming things is, okay, so you've had a lead going into half. You had it in the Giants game. You had it in the Rams game. I'm trying to think back just off memory here. Obviously, the Cowboys game, I believe you were up in that game.
You're up by 3 on the Commanders at the half, I believe, because Commanders drove down to kick the field goal, and I was like, you're only up by 3. Like, I wanted you guys to be able to have that lead, but that was how they ended the half, was they still held a lead, and that's like majority of the games they've played, they've been they've been out in front, and then the back end is just they've kind of collapsed when it's come to, especially in the fourth quarter, where I believe currently through 7 games they scored a grand total of that many points, 7 points so far in the fourth quarter of all their games for the whole season, which has just been brutal.
That's abysmal, and that's what's alarming to me is what is happening at halftime. I know I've heard Peyton Manning before talk about there's no such thing as halftime adjustments, and there's no such thing, like, there's only so much that's going to happen in that 15-minute window. But I mean, other teams are obviously doing something. I mean, you look at that Rams game, they ultimately decided to go to the run game right out the chute, and they went from like no run yards to over 100 run yards with Kyra Williams, and it was crazy. So, like, what are we not doing? Is it that, or is it just the talent? They're only built to last through a half, and then once that adrenaline rush phases off and they kind of sit back and relax a little bit, that's what kills us in that second half. I don't have the answer for that, but ultimately, with the return of hopefully our savior Kyler Murray, hopefully that changes as well. I mean, with his competitive fire and just what he can do as a quarterback, I would think that would change things.
It's going to take an entire team, especially with a new scheme being implemented. And this is the first time he's going to be implementing that new scheme since I believe even in his high school years, he was still running an air raid type of spread offense and whatnot. And so, as I kept mentioning to people, we got to be more patient when it comes to like evaluating what he can do from the get-go, because it might be one of those cases where they're just going to try to keep his comfort level like going and then slowly implement those live snaps especially from under center. And this type of offense is supposed to be some sort of a mix of like a Shanahan and like a West Coast offense type of scheme. I don't think it's a full blown like West Coast offense. That's typically more like a short pass, like yak type of situation, which I know that's how Shanahan runs the scheme as well. But it's going to implement more run heavy like type of formations. That's the reason why the under center formation is very important. That no longer being always in the shotgun, not being that much in the pistol, just straight up, just either having an I formation or a single back formation, and getting these guys to block like horizontally from left to right, right to left, pulling people left to right, right to left. So it's a lot of moving parts, and that is a lot to like get used to, as well as knowing that like when you're under center, like calling making moves to be able to like move somebody from one side of the pocket to the left side one side of the formation to the left side of the formation, and having them either do a move where they come back around, like that one play that was on Twitter where the tight end looped around Josh Dobbs. That takes a
Trey
lot
McBride
of
block.
Yeah, no, that was beautiful, and that takes a lot of practice. And it also comes down to the quarterback knowing exactly when to snap the ball. So it's like I mentioned to people, the evaluation process starts from game one, and if it's great, then it's great, and that's good. But if it's not, then it's not a situation where people need to panic or start saying, you know what, the scheme isn't going to be working for him. It's going to take time. So we got to be fair, but we also got to hope for the best.
Yeah, it's something I think at least that's more... I think in a lot of ways, the talent deficiency of Arizona is really what's showing up in the second half, because you look at the Cardinals' stats through the first part of their game as far as their points in the first half of games. They actually are really good at being able to have a good opening game script, of being able to score. And that just, I think, is a sign of coaching, where it's not necessarily saying, oh, we know that teams are going to attack us this way, so we'll counter this way. They're also, when teams are bringing up their own self-scouting, they're actually able to like prepare and plan for some of that. The great example I think of that is in the Rams game, where you realize they were not going to let Puka Nacua beat them, and they were not going to let Cooper Kupp beat them in that first quarter, and they were going to apply consistent pressure to Matthew Stafford. I think that the biggest thing as far as for what changes, and you can even see some here as far as the statistics overall, Cardinals are actually in the top 10 as far as for points that they score in the first half. Like, that's basically a top 10 offense in the first half of games. When you get, though, to the second half of games and then into the fourth quarter, they are actually, as far as the team opponent, they give up about 11 or so points in the first half as far as their opponent scoring. And then in the second half of games, they give up about, on average, 2 touchdowns, or if not more than that's like an average, which means the Cardinals are going in with the lead. They're not scoring any points. They've averaged 1 point in the fourth quarter, and they average, I think it's one of the worst as far as in the third quarter in the league as well. and other teams are putting up 2 touchdowns on them. So when you're saying that there's not as much as far as halftime adjustments, I think it's more the Cardinals can contain for so long, but it's like a lower weight boxer who's trying to like kind of punch above his class. So you think about a guy who he actually may come out, surprise you, get in a couple of jabs, get things going, and then by the end of the match, the decision is going to the other bigger, stronger, faster guy who just wears him down. And I go back to the Rams game last week where I felt they were going to lose that game because I did not have any confidence in the front of the defensive line to stop the run. And so if the Rams just said, hey, we're going to run the ball, Cardinals weren't going to be able to do anything. And that's almost an inverse of what I saw with the Houston Texans game in 2021. I was at that game, I know, at least Tyler. We did a whole setup beforehand with getting stuff ready for fans. And that was a game in which the Cardinals offense looked terrible through one quarter. Kyler got sacked for a safety. The Texans, at least, were able to turn the ball over, got a field goal again. And the whole takeaway I had was the Cardinals played a perfect quarter. I should say the Cardinals played as bad a quarter as you can play. Texans played as perfect of a quarter. And on the very, very next series, Cardinals basically just got right down and scored a touchdown. And that lead was erased. Like, if you give someone your best shot and all you get is 5 points, then it just shows that you're probably not going to be cut out for this long term. And I think that's really what we're seeing with this Cardinals team is that teams are just continuing to do what they're doing, chip away at the armor. And eventually it just breaks. And that's where we see it, I think, especially in the fourth quarter. And the most obvious sign of that is with Josh Dobbs. He has not played very well in the fourth quarter of games. Outside of one big play against the Dallas Cowboys, we really just have not seen him be able to put points on the board. And on the defensive side, they just have not been able to really stop a team's number one overall weapon. And I think that's right now been the story of the season. And you're going to need Kyler Murray to be able to come in to hopefully provide more of that spark in the clutch. But he's not going to come and fix this defense for where it is. And that's where I'm curious, at least, Tyler, when Kyler comes back, what do you feel like is something as fans that we're going to expect? And then maybe what is what we kind of should expect with this team in the midst of a rebuild?
You know, but the thing is it really on the defense? You know what I mean? When we look at like some of these scores, like last week against Seattle, they only gave up 20 points and they had three turnovers? I mean,
yeah.
At that point, if you have Kyler Murray, you have to think you're going to put up more than 10 points. In the week before against the Rams, they lost 26-9. Again, with a Kyler Murray, I got to feel that they're going to put up more than 26 points. I just do. And especially even with what you have on offense, right? Like, I know a lot of people are like, oh, you're missing James Conner. Oh, you're missing Zach Ertz. But let's be real. I love Zach Ertz. But at the end of the day, it looks like Father Time is starting to catch up to Zach Ertz. He's looking more like a Jimmy Graham, you know, how he's looked in his past X amount of years. And not that big of a drop off, but, you know, those first couple of years of Jimmy Graham drop off where Jimmy Graham was at the end. And now Zach Ertz is Zach Ertz was the same way, and now he's slowly regressing. So, you know, you have a young guy in Trey McBride. You saw how he started to step up last couple of weeks and get opportunities. That's what we really need to see. And Kyler's going to have those weapons, right? He's going to have Hollywood Brown. He'll have Rondale Moore. I would love to see my favorite guy of all time, Greg Dortch, get some action, because that guy and his separation and that he doesn't drop anything. I'd love to see him get some run on the offense. But ultimately, I think Kyler has tools that he can work with, and I think it will be a bounce back, and he can capitalize off what the defense is doing, because I think the defense has ultimately played pretty well. Like I'm looking at the schedule again. I mean, to the Commanders, we lost by 4 points. It was 2016. I mean, they're very low scoring. The defense has held people in check for the most part. You know what I mean? The Giants didn't have anything at halftime. And or virtually anything. I'd have to look what the halftime score was, but they ended up rallying in that second half. But you would think our offense isn't doing anything in the second half. So if you have Kyler in there who can produce offense in the second half, I think you'll be in good shape.
Yeah, it was 20-0 at the half, and the Giants ended up putting up, I think the Cardinals actually, they put a touchdown on the board. Cardinals responded. Yeah, it went to 28-7. So you're like, okay, this is basically like game over. And then the tides just turned. We were like, okay. And from what I at least have read, Justine Anderson reported on it, the belief is that Mike Kafka, who's the offensive coordinator, had play calling taken away from them. Brian Dable just said, all right, give me that. All right, I'm going to call this game. And they're able to come back all the way from down 20-0 at the half to be able to get a win. We saw, I think, similar types of efforts of bad luck, I think, that have popped up for some Cardinals places. But like you said, we expected, in a lot of ways, this defense to be like giving up on average 30 points a game and teams be having their get-right game against the Cardinals, but that's only really been true thus far for the offensive juggernaut teams that we expected were going to be offensive juggernauts, such as Bengals, which ironically, the Bengals had been one of the worst offenses against the teams, but then, of course, Joe Burrow gets his ankle healthy just before. The Rams, they have Cooper Kupp. He gets healthy just before. Some of it has been bad luck where the Cardinals end up in a spot where they've got James Conner and Budda Baker are out. They're having to kind of shuffle guys around. Meanwhile, other teams' offensive have guys who are hurt. They're struggling. They get those guys back just in time to play Arizona, with one exception, of course, being DK Metcalf last week. And I think that's part of the reason why the Cardinals were able to keep it a close game was they finally were able to have something kind of go their way of another player being out and them getting Budda Baker back. But at the end of the day, the team is overperforming, I think, based on what especially national people have said. But it's not like they're performing in a way where as Cardinals fans that we didn't see this coming. And I think that's been the biggest area is that I think there's been maybe a conflict of fans torn between, hey, do we want to like just tank for the draft pick? It's a bad season anyway, to seeing the effort on the field and wanting to be able to celebrate a Cardinals win and having to kind of hold those two things together to get an accurate view of what this team really is.
This feels like the same old Cardinals of the 90s. And that's for those that have been longtime fans, that I think that's the problem where they see that as like, well, the no expectation is the issue, right? Like that is the problem for fans. Like they don't like going into the season thinking, oh, season's already over. And so now that they have shown glimmer of hope, it's tough. It's tough. I think back to what you were just saying about the Giants game. If you go into that second half and you put up, you're putting up more than 6 points with Kyler Murray. And so, like, that game is yours. They're not coming back. I don't care who switched to play calling. It doesn't matter. Like, you would have held with them point for point, or, you would at least put more points on the board than 6 and or a touchdown, and you would have sealed that game. So that's the hard part. I think when everyone thinks about these games and you think about if Kyler Murray was at quarterback, and I know a lot of people are down on, that's the funny part. When you talk to fans, a lot of fans are still down on Kyler Murray. For a while there, fans were like, oh, Josh Dobbs is probably better than Kyler Murray. Obviously, that's not the case. And so I get it. Kyler Murray, bad attitude at times, kind of looked like a whiner on the sideline, looked like he lacked those leadership skills. It looked really bad on that in-season Hard Knocks on HBO. Yeah. Kyler Murray's just not, I mean, he would be more chewing into players versus coaching them and being a leader on the team. It just was not good optics for Kyler Murray. Since this injury, I will tell you, I've seen a complete 180, and I've gone on record saying this multiple times. Kyler Murray, everything you hear is he's the first one there. He's the last one to leave. When you see him on away games, he's walking the sidelines, high-fiving fans, taking pictures. Like, this ain't the same guy that I remember 2 seasons ago, 3 seasons ago. Like, it seems like this injury has caused Kyler Murray to, and maybe really a good PR team and agent have gotten around him like, hey, dude, we got to repair your image. But that's what it seems like. This injury has humbled him in some cases. He's never had an injury like this. And it's been one of those things where he realizes like, oh man, I got to come back. And it's almost like the Kyler Murray revenge tour. That's what I'm excited for. He's going to come out looking for blood because people have him ranked as the 30th QB overall and 35th QB overall. And I think he's taking that as disrespect. And I'm excited to see what it looks like once he gets back on the field. And I'm glad it's not this weekend against the Baltimore Ravens, because I think that would not be a good position to put him in his first game in this new offense and his first game under center.
Yeah, let's hope that does ring true with the under center part, especially with him getting those live snaps. But one thing I gotta also say about like his image when it comes to that, I do want to see him doing everything that he needs to do as a quarterback, not only because of the fact that he's the cornerstone. he is the highest paid Cardinal at this moment right now. So he also has that big investment. And like the Cardinals, well, with any franchise, you have your center person, your poster boy and whatnot. You have to have that person be not only like a fan favorite, but he has to also be an embracer of the city. So that is one thing that I enjoy hearing about, like him taking pictures with fans, and I also see him engaging with fans on Twitter, like in a positive way. You know, going out there and kind of showing like somewhat of a campaign to say like, hey guys, I'm your guys' quarterback moving forth. I also gotta kind of think as well that he knows also that this is a big important year for him, obviously because of what's coming up at the end of the year where we're going to be seated in the draft. So if he comes back, he plays well, he puts the Cardinals in a position where they can't make any decisions. And obviously if he plays well and they evaluate him, they're like, yeah, this guy is really picking up the offense. We got something good going forth with our quarterback and this new offensive scheme, then obviously it's going to be all great for him and also for the franchise.
No, totally agree. And the only reason why I think it's a question is because we really have seen how this team was built and how top heavy they were talent wise. Just not a lot of depth. And coming into this year, you look at where the cap situation had been. The Cardinals were almost like going to go all in 2022. And you can see with Hard Knocks being in the building, some of those veterans, it was kind of like, I think we talked about it, it was kind of the end of that era. Regardless, you're going to have to reset at some point. The name I was thinking of also, as far as with Zach Ertz and seeing, and this is like coming off an ACL, being 32 years old, it can be difficult. But the name I think of, at least, is the former ASU tight end Todd Heap, who, you know, I think they even came in and are expecting that they finally have a good tight end. You can kind of tell, like, he was just kind of at the end of his career where there were drops that shouldn't have been made, other plays that weren't made, and there was just issues with the quarterback, it seemed. Now that 2012 year was just an absolutely abysmal year, and Heap ended up retiring shortly afterwards. But it was very similar as far as just feeling like that this should have been a fit, and we even saw it work as a fit last year. It just has not been the same. It feels like disaster has happened every time, and I don't even think it's totally been Todd Heap's fault. Some of that I think has fallen onto where not even Todd Heap, sorry, Zach Ertz's fault. There's been times where he's been either open or gotten separation, and the accuracy we've seen from Josh Dobbs just has not been there. One of the things, yeah.
Was it San Fran or what? I'm trying to remember. I've been on a couple away games this year. I think it was San Fran where there was one to him right in the end zone, and it hit him right in the hands. It was right at the very end, and he didn't catch it. And you could see the frustration. I was sitting literally along that end zone, and Zach, right after the play, just was beside himself. And you could tell he was mad at himself. It wasn't a Dobbs issue. It was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I catch that ball 10 out of 10 times. And, I part of me feels like he knows it. He knows he's taking steps back and it might not be something he could rebound from. And it's just one of those things where I'm going to be a serviceable tight end. I'll be a guy that, you can rely on to some degree, but he can't be carrying you from an offensive production standpoint anymore. I just think that's where we're at with Zach Ertz.
Hey, he holds himself accountable, and that's great to see.
Yeah, that's been good. I know that was something that also you can see with watching just how the play went. I was on a Seahawks kind of podcast last week. I think it was the Seattle Overload. And the other thing they were talking about was they messaged me during the game and were like, hey, brother, like, why isn't Zach Ertz making a play? Like, Dobbs throws it to him. It's just a little bit behind the receiver who's open, but it, like, hits him just right where the hands are. And so you're like, okay, one, that's not a greatest throw, but, like, if it hits you in a bad place, the hands, it's not a bad place to hit you. That was a joke my grandfather would usually make when he'd see a drop. He'd be like, oh, you hit him in the numbers. That's the wrong place to throw it to him. That's why he dropped it. And, like, that was always his joke, was just, like, putting it on the receiver if the quarterback delivered it. And we're in a place where Zach Ertz is going onto IR. He's going to miss at least 4 games. Hopefully some of that is being able to kind of just get right if there is going to be Kyler coming back, since we did see that connection. But this may now be a great opportunity to evaluate what you actually have in Trey McBride as a pass catcher. He came on strong at the end of 2022, even without Kyler Murray there. And this is kind of the spot of finding that balance between how do you be a competitive team that isn't just saying, hey, you know what, doesn't matter what's happening out there, we're just going to throw our guys out there and then evaluate for the future, win or lose, doesn't matter. If you try to go like that, players are going to check out and you're not going to be able to evaluate them because you're going to be giving guys like, yeah, like I come out here and play this game not to just like have people guess at me, but I want to play this game to win, to entertain people, to like actually be able to put good play on tape that I can be proud of. And the other side of it is if you're going to be expecting this team to kind of go out and win all of these different games when really you're recognizing at 1-6, they're not going to be anywhere close to playoff contention. Even if Kyler came back and they won each of the different games that they had left at 10-6, you still may not make it into the playoffs. So that's the spot of saying now that we know at least for sure where the season is for the Cardinals team, we had guessed it was going to be there. Who are the guys that you're going to want to lock up and say, these are like the new Buda Bakers, these are the new Dennis Gardex? Who those players are is of critical importance to determine, and that's part of why I think a lot of Cardinals fans are not happy that Zach Ertz is going on IR, but at least it feels like the, I guess you can say the reward we at least get as a consolation prize is we'll get to hopefully see what Trey McBride looks like as a big piece of this passing attack.
I'm excited for that. Once Ertz went on IR, I mean, I feel bad for a guy, especially this stage in the game of his career, having to go on an IR with an injury like this. But at the end of the day, Amani Ossenfort has not made any confusion when it comes to how he feels about Steve Keim draft classes. So at the end of the day, let's see, for Monty's sake and for the team's sake, is Trey McBride a piece they actually like, or is that someone they're going to want to move on from just like everybody else? I'm excited to see what Trey can do. I think he has showed those glimmers. He was, tight end of the year in college, and I think he's. I think he could be an impact player. Let's say it again.
He got the award for the best tight end in college.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there you go.
Good old John Mackey Award. Gotta love it.
Yeah, and you're gonna see in the clips that I bring up later on in the show that he'll have two very good catches off of play action under center, which I was excited to see him on those crossing routes and whatnot. He's a very good route runner. He's got really good hands. Let's not forget that he also caught a ball last year. I'm not sure who it was against. I think it was either against New England or the Buccaneers. I'm not 100% sure. Where he got lit up and he held on to the ball. So he has some strong hands.
You know what I really like about him too, about Trey, is that when he does make a catch, when it's a big catch, the emotion and the energy, I feel like that's what you're missing a little bit. You're missing the swagger from certain players, especially offensively.
Yeah.
I think that's something we need both on the offense and defensive side. And you have that with your Buda Bakers of the world. But we just don't have a lot of it. And so, getting a guy like that to step in and I think of when I see, I'm not comparing Travis Kelce to Trey McBride, but anytime Travis Kelce makes a huge catch, you can feel the energy behind him, and his celebration, him getting excited. I think of Deion Sanders at Colorado.
I think that's the Swifties, Tyler. I think that's just the Swifties across the nation are just jumping up and down. That's where we feel that. That's what it is, I think.
But I think of Deion Sanders right now, where he makes it a rule where if his players don't celebrate when they make a good play, they get in trouble, right? I would like to see a little more swagger, a little more, hey, we are we know who we are and we can play and we can hang with you. And they showed it with the Cowboys. I mean, they can, on that given game, they showed they can beat anybody. I mean, they just need to go out there and execute.
Oh, man. I agree with you when it comes to that swagger. He has that ability to have that type of swagger. Excuse me, guys. Sorry. Somebody just rang the doorbell. Anyways, he has that ability to be able to do that because of the fact that he knows that he's got good blocking ability and good pass catching ability as well.
Yeah, and again, the tight ends usually take a bit of time in the NFL. George Kittle wasn't George Kittle overnight. Even some of these top 10 tight ends, some of these guys you'll actually see they're not even the top tight end in their class, but they're just a good Iowa tight end who joins a good situation. We've seen that with Sam Laporta of the Lions this year, and it really just shows, honestly, that being able to be this big kind of slot receiver. Cardinals at least have seen guys like that before. Hakeem Butler, when he came out of Iowa State, was kind of more of that bigger type of guy who could get a free release. We've seen the Jimmy Graham types. But at the end of the day, with how this system works and what we've been able to see is you're able to get not just different mismatches, but you're also able to kind of just be able to exploit defenses because you've got a guy who can be used as like a chess piece going both ways. You always think of the NFL, and it's hard to like compare it directly to a game like chess, but when you think like the X's and O's are an important part of the game, some of that is just the approach you're going to have. Cliff Kingsbury was in a place where he started out and wanted to just spread teams out wide, have as many receivers, force teams to cover as much of the field as possible. And as we saw in the National Football League, the pass rushers and the linebackers are so good that you're just going to expose your quarterback to so much, and you're going to see guys be able to play zone coverage really well. So what you have to do is you have to be able to move the ball on the ground to force the defense to actually say, hey, we need to be able to make sure that we can stop this ground attack, because if we can't and guys are just able to run us up the gut, and then suddenly we're like, all right, first thing we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and leave our safety a little closer to the line where like he'll be able to kind of peek into the backfield. Next thing you know, a guy like Jamar Chase is suddenly gone and you're a step behind him. He gets a big touchdown. The modern NFL is fundamentally guys running a lot of the same plays, having a lot of the same matchups and little tweaks onto those. What I think is interesting is that with this Cardinals team, we've kind of gone from the Cliff Vance area of just trying to get as much talent as we can to execute to feeling like now we're almost the other side of, hey, if Trey McBride can actually hit and be an offensive weapon, suddenly you can at least say there's positive pieces on the offensive line. There's going to be enough talent to be able to actually say that when Kyler comes back, we don't have to say this is like Aaron Rodgers with all rookie pass catchers last year, who you can't really evaluate if he's washed or not. You'll be able to at least get a good, accurate look because the talent that you have is in a good place. And I really do feel like this Cardinals team, for better or for worse, they seem to have just struggled in finding guys who've been able to step up at least behind James Conner after he went out. We seemed like for a while Michael Wilson and Hollywood Brown were going to be those guys. I think that Hollywood as a deep threat has been missed a few more times than not from Dobbs. Michael Wilson has just seemingly been gone the last few weeks. He went from having about an average of about 50 yards a game to kind of at one point I think he had 2 touchdowns, 86 yards. I think it was 2 touchdowns, 76 yards against the Niners. He's had 3 catches for 26 last week. So you're talking about a guy who went from averaging like 20 yards a catch to not that many, at least. And I think if we see an increase in a role for Trey McBride, if we see kind of those yards, those targets kind of stay consistent, the more that he gets fed the ball, pretty easy to be able to tell that he's doing good. With the Michael Wilson, you got to wonder, has he hit a rookie wall of sorts? Have defenses got film? Has something changed? Or is this a simple case of Josh Dobbs just not looking at a guy who, let's be honest, when he's looked at him, has really produced at a high level in the National Football League, similar to how whenever you'd throw it to Greg Dortch, he would end up producing as well, it would seem like.
Yeah, they're just going away from like targeting him altogether, especially like in the first half. They don't even seem to want to target him. All these targets have been going to Hollywood Brown and Rondale Moore, which it just baffles me that, like, once again, another year goes with Rondale Moore playing more behind the line of scrimmage than it is going downfield, or at least being used as that quick slot. So I think about that all the time. Like, why is it that the majority of the targets are going to the same 2 receivers? And you had, I mean, the whole reason why I was so high up on Michael Wilson to begin with, because for the first time, we have somebody that shows good route running ability and good hands. He's a 50-50 contest catcher, which is what we need in today's NFL, because most of the time, especially if you're attacking underneath, you're going to have somebody covering you at least within a yard. So you're going to have strong hands.
Win that one-on-one.
Point of ball. Exactly. Win those one-on-ones consistently. And he's shown that. So I think it's more of the offense and what they've been like mostly just like prioritizing when it comes to like who they're going to distribute it to. But they also need to make a big shift. They got a big body tight end, like that's a wide receiver that can block. They could be out there on every single down. You don't need to take him off the field. And you got a receiver on the outside opposite of Hollywood Brown that is that 50-50 guy. So I mean, you'd think that would completely make an offense be more well-rounded, and instead it's just been the Rondell Hollywood show. Like, hey, where are these guys at? What play are we going to run to Rondell Moore? What kind of jet sweep are we going to do with him? Orbit motion? What wheel route are we going to send him on? It's just like, defenses have picked up on that as well.
Yeah, for sure. Last few weeks, at least, we've seen defenses. Rondale Moore actually has more rushing yards on the season than receiving, which in some cases indicates we've seen some of these huge gains. He had a 41-yarder against the Bengals, a 45-yarder running against the Cowboys. That was the one that went for a touchdown. He ended up actually, unfortunately, kind of being phased out of at least one area of the game. Against the Rams, he was at -4 yards rushing, and against the Seahawks, he only had 2 catches for 2 yards. I know that some people have said that he's maybe a bit more of that receiving back out of the backfield with that explosiveness, like you would think of the. Someone talked about, like, hey, maybe you talk about a mini version of Austin Eckler, who's more of Justin, all these J names. Justin Herbert's more like check down machine and the guy that will get a couple of those carries a game and be able to explode through. And then you can kind of hand it to him on the goal line. I don't know if Moore has some of that size. But really, the Cardinals are going to have to be creative some because Greg Dortch hasn't played many snaps on offense this season. He did get added to the injury report on Friday with an ankle injury, which is probably part of why Bocelli was promoted. He's been their main kick and punt returner, and I think that this is maybe the perfect opportunity to put Rondale Moore back there as far as with that role and see if you can get him a couple more touches a game. But at the end of the day, it's felt very strange as far as for why he hasn't necessarily developed in the receiving game to the level that we thought that a player of his size and speed could. It felt like it was going to be, Kyler, Rondale, and Hollywood Brown, like these 5'9" and shorter guys for the most part are going to line up and just be able to beat you with speed and getting open. And in the case of Moore, toughness. And to this point, we just really have not seen him be a core player of the Cardinals versus more of like that gadget role player guy that we saw with him be under Cliff Kingsbury, just used a bit better, where he's now getting 50 or so with like that rushing yards a game, whereas previously he would be getting like 4 catches for -1 yard in the game just because of how that offense was designed to work. Tyler, how do you feel like if you were going to look at this offense and try to fix it outside of just saying we need James Conner back, because I do think that probably is the closest answer, what do you feel like could be done to fix some of this offense for Arizona?
Well, you need to commit to the run. I mean, I get James Conner, it's a big missing piece, but DeMercado hasn't been bad either. It's just you're not committing to the run long term. And then when you do commit to the run, you then have Dobbs where he's got to pick up a short down and then he can't. So, that becomes your problem. But I just think you hammer the ball. I mean, I think that's what you need to rely on, is just run the ball until they can stop you. I think DeMercado got like 4.5 yards a carry last week. I mean, give it to him 3 times. I mean, he'd be all right.
Yeah.
Or do we saw it, I think, in the Washington game, or maybe it was the I don't know. It was early in the season, but we saw them do the tush push or the brotherly shove a couple times, and it worked. They were able to execute it. I get some teams have tried it and they can't do it, but if you run DeMercado for 2 rushes and he gets 9 yards, hello. I mean, you're watching Philadelphia do it every week. Like, just do it. I mean, at that point. So I'm over the Rondale Moore experience. I've been over it for 2 seasons now. I think Greg Dortch showed last year when he got opportunities, he's much better than Rondale Moore, just naturally better than Rondale Moore. And it's so crazy to say, and I'm not trying to be that guy that roots for the backup, but Greg Dortch, every time he's gotten an opportunity, has been really good. Like, go look at the numbers. I mean, it's crazy. So if you want to inject some offense, yeah, you could try Rondale Moore in the backfield some more. Wow, that's a mouthful there.
At least that gets Greg Dortch on the field.
But it gets Greg Dortch on the field,
more
right?
Rondale basically is like the idea. But yeah, even with Dortch, he may be, if he's hurt and is going to be out for Sunday, that's where Bocelli is. That's been one of the biggest things, I think, as far as the Cardinals narratives. And I think it's something where I called it adding injuries to insult is what I've called it. The Cardinals effectively came into the season, you say, all right, if you had to pick 3 players from the Arizona Cardinals that you do not want to miss any time to injury, I'd be like, okay, Kyler Murray, here's your quarterback. Buda Baker, that's like your defensive captain right there. And then offense, okay, like looking at the talent they have and everything, probably James Conner in this run first, run heavy offense. And all three of those guys being able to be out at the same time, that's been a huge blow for the most part. Like, that's just, there's no other way around it. The Cardinals were a very top-heavy team. I think we didn't see what the impact of a James Conner was, especially in this scheme, until after he's been gone from the field, though. He had actually been leading, or at least had been up there, I think, in the top 3 with other NFL running backs as far as number of explosive plays for 15-plus yards. One stat that we saw the last week that I think really hammers this home is it shows your explosive and negative run rate. So basically take all the rushes you do, divide it by the number of attempts that you have, and then look at, hey, how many times are you getting a carry of 15-plus yards, and how many times are you actually getting 0 or less than 0 yards? So you're talking about like a guy who actually is rushed 3 times, had -2 yards in Keontae Ingram. He effectively got replaced by DeMercado. That's a guy where you're saying if you're not getting positive yardage and you're putting your quarterback into 2nd and 11 or even like a 3rd and 12 type of place, pass rushers can pin their ears back. It's going to make life difficult for you. But if you can then flip that and make it into an explosive play, suddenly you're 15 yards further down the field. The defense is on their heels. They're now trying to stop James Conner. Suddenly that play action fake that you have for the most part is going to be super effective. And that's something I think that we've at least been able to see with James Conner was he would have one of the highest explosive run rates in the league, only behind Breece Hall, who's essentially been dominant with the Jets as far as his second year. He looked great last year before his ACL tear. And Raheem Mostert, which the Dolphins basically had him for I think he's still running to this day against the Broncos defense. I think that he just has kept running and they're still trying to tackle him. But James Conner being 3rd after that just shows at least that he's not just running hard and getting free, but he was shooting like a cannon and he wasn't getting tackled for a lot of negative yards. Whereas a guy who's got a high explosive run rate, but also would get a lot of negative yards that you would see would be someone like you'd say a Khalil Herbert is a perfect example. You're basically feast or famine. Either he's going to be running down the field for 15 yards or you're going to be tackling him for -3. It's one or the other. And some of the elite running backs are over here in this corner are the guys who can make people miss, have produced. And they took that off the field with the Cardinals. I do think that it showed that there are probably some depth areas. Some of that maybe would be in spot, but I think ultimately the fact that they're going to miss him again against the Ravens, I think is a huge blow. I did want to also bring up as we kind of transition into talking about the Ravens. This is going to be a tough game. The Ravens are a top 10 offense, and right now they have the number 2 ranked defense. As far as points per game, they're actually number 1 overall. They only give up about 271 yards on defense. That's just below the Browns, and they only give up 14 points a game on average. This is not a great Cardinals offense. Tyler, do you think the Cardinals have a shot against this Ravens game, or are we going to be kind of just biding our time and seeing what it looks like when Kyler comes back?
We have no shot this weekend. And
6 turnovers, and you score on all those turnovers. We still might lose. No, I'm just joking. At least, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I
no shot.
The bearer of bad news. Lamar Jackson has never lost the NFC West. He's 4-0 in his career. And if you watched any Baltimore Ravens this season, yeah, they started out what seemed a little bit slow in terms of that offense, but Lamar last week looked like MVP Lamar. I mean, he threw for 350 yards, had 3 touchdowns against a very good Detroit Lions team. Their defense is nails. I mean, they held that Lions explosive offense to 6 points. So when you talk about our offense that's struggling and our defense that isn't very good as well, that can't play a complete game, you're going to need that. I mean, we're literally going to have to play a Dallas Cowboys type game like we saw earlier in the season to pull out a win here. I mean, that's just the only way you can do it. They sacked Goff 5 times. They have the most sacks in the NFL. Yeah. So Dobbs is going to be under pressure all day, and it's going to be tough. The one glimmer of hope is that they do give up 4.2 yards per game rushing.
Yep. You're
going to have to do what I was saying earlier. Going to have to run the ball and run it a lot and commit to that and not make Dobbs have to throw more times than he needs to. I mean, that's just what it is. Predictions, if we want to get into that, I'll tell you right now, I mean, I looked at the NFL's predictions and all the writers, and everybody has us losing by 2 scores. So I don't know what the line is right now, but smash that all day, the over, because it looks like it's going to be Baltimore a lot, Cardinals a little. I'm thinking 28-10 Baltimore.
Yeah. Marcos, what do you have at least for your score prediction?
I'm thinking it's going to be like 17-31.
31. I've got this. The Ravens, their defense has been so good. Mike McDonald, I feel like he's going to be a head coach for some team next year. He has just come in and really emerged. He was Michigan's defensive coordinator last year. I should say 2 years ago. Last year he was also with the Ravens, but their offense was just in shambles. It was like the Ravens needed a wide receiver. The Cardinals needed a center. And they both kind of had what the other needed, and that was the exact thing that went down for the most part. Difference, of course, is the Ravens have been able to go out and at least been able to keep a Mark Andrews around and been able to be functional with a new rookie. I've got this 24-6. I think that it's going to be a lot more tough sledding because the Cardinals may be a really explosive offense in the first half, but the Ravens are too. I think that they'll be able to come out and surprise the Ravens. They'll be at home. I think it's not going to be this, 40-point blowout that I think some people are wondering if it could be. But I do think that it kind of turns into more of the second half, like Cardinals aren't going to be able to kind of come back as much, more of just some of what we've been able to see and not quite as competitive as the Seahawks game last week. As we wrap up our time today, at least, any last thoughts specifically around Kyler Murray? This is one of the areas where his fans, I know some fans saw him not being listed as injured on Thursday. We had all said, hey, don't believe that as far as for him coming back. Either it'd be next week, but it seems like the team would much, much rather have him back week 10 against the Falcons is what I would believe to be the case. It just makes so much more sense to say you get to go at home. It's not a bad defense, but it's not an elite defense by any means. And you're going to have all of that momentum, I think, to be able to see if you can go out there and get that second win of the season, just because I think it's going to be a very different atmosphere inside of State Farm Stadium.
I'm pumped to see Kyler come back. I think you're dead right that he'll be back versus Atlanta. They're not going to put him in a position to have a bad outing. They're going to give him every opportunity to come out there and look like an MVP right out the gate. And so Atlanta's the spot. It's at home. They're not very good. To me, it makes the most sense. I don't think this week was ever in play as much as they're like, oh, Kyler wants to play. Of course, Kyler wants to play. Kyler wanted to play 6 weeks ago. Okay, that's there's no secret there. But put him in the best position to put yourself as a franchise in the best position. I'd say you're going to play him against Atlanta, and that's the way to go.
Yeah, I wouldn't count them boys out. Those Atlanta Falcons are having themselves quite a year. So,
they have first place in their division.
That is ideal, though, to bring him back against the Falcons. That's definitely what you would definitely want to bring him if he's trying to rush himself back to the field.
Blake, you could be first place in that division, okay?
Hey, I'm not Bijan Robinson. They needed to figure out what was going on with him last week because fantasy people were like, why isn't he playing? Is he feeling sick? They're still going out and winning games at least, yeah.
Yeah, no, he had diarrhea and he wasn't feeling too well, and then leave the guy alone. But that division's
just put that in the injury report, questionable to return, diarrhea. That's what you got to put in the injury report for us.
He's going to the locker room clearly to go to the bathroom, and he stops and he makes a grimace on his face, we've all had it before where you're not feeling too good in the tummy. Bijan was feeling a little sick and he did not want to take a shot to the gut. Okay. But that division is terrible. So I'm not scared of Atlanta. I get it. They're doing better than expected, but that Cleveland defense is for real. This Baltimore defense is for real. You don't want Kyler Murray going against either of those defenses for his first game of the season. And the one thing I forgot to mention is this gives him 4 weeks of actual practice with this team and actual practice in this offense.
With first team snaps.
Yeah. He hasn't gotten first team snaps yet, so that's
I mean, I bet you'll start to see him get a little bit of them next week.
No, totally agree.
He'll be the emergency QB next week.
Yeah, I would assume so. Yeah, I mean they'd have to get him back in the flow of things.
When he has to be activated, right? I'm pretty sure he has to be truly on the roster next week. So he'll be activated. He isn't going to start, but he'll be the emergency backup quarterback where, they'll probably hold 3 up or something like that. And he'll be on the roster, but they'll give him some snaps next week. And then he'll get all the snaps going into Atlanta.
No, I definitely think that's going to be something that we'll want to see, because if you look at the rest of this season with the schedule, with how things play out, they're still in the NFC West. They still have a couple of tough teams that are going to be coming up with the Eagles game. You've got some interesting spots that pop up. Like, I think we're looking at highlight the Texans game, because obviously the draft pick the Cardinals have. The Steelers obviously have had really huge struggles in offense. It's a road game. And of course, the Bears. I think that what Cardinals fans should probably look at and hope for is maybe this offense next year, Kyler proves himself to do well. And maybe you can add a Marvin Harrison Jr., get one of those picks. That's not maybe the trade a huge haul for a quarterback pick, but if you could get your new Larry Fitzgerald Jr. and a Marvin Harrison Jr., I think a lot of Cardinals fans would at least be able to look forward to this 2024 season and say, hey, maybe this rebuild, it may be hard, but maybe it's only hard for 1 year. I think if there's more struggles that we see that happen, don't anticipate, and the team kind of continues to spiral downward, even with Kyler, that's going to be a whole tough thing. I think we got to see what the kid has and see, at least with all the work that he's put into it, before we cross that bridge, because there's so much, at least, that is at stake, I think, for him personally, and I think he'll rise to the challenge.
God, what if Kyler Murray isn't good? That's my
life. I'd say Cardinals, they put themselves in the right spot. Like, if they weren't completely sold on Kyler Murray, where you want to be is having a high draft pick, having another first-round pick, having more third-round picks, and having picks next year as best as you can. They're, I think, in a spot where they're going to be good either way. It's just going to be on Kyler's got all of the opportunity now to prove himself, and I'm excited to see what that's going to look like.
There's clearly an internal plan that I think people do not talk about enough. When you look at all the free agents they signed this offseason, they all got 1 and 2 year deals. Every single one of them got 1 and 2 year. I think one guy got a 3-year, but for the most part, they were all 1 and 2 year deals. And that was intentional. That was, we're just going to fill out a roster with low salary guys. And if Kyler ain't the guy and we got to eat that contract, we'll have cap room to do it. And it won't kill us too bad. So
speaking of cap room, CD Lamb, anyone, like, go to the Cowboys if they don't make it all the way, but like, hey, you guys going to pay that guy? Because we'll give you a draft pick for him, and we got some cap space if we want to sign that contract. Maybe that's what something people have talked about ever since the Cardinals passed on him. I don't see it happening. I think it is interesting of, like, the fact of the matter is that if the Cardinals, you feel that they're either a receiver away or able to at least have some room to add to this defense next year, and you get that confidence of Kyler's our guy, that feels like that would be mission accomplished, even in the midst of a really bad year.
I mean, they traded a first round for Hollywood. They should have traded a first round for CD Lamb if that was the case.
Yeah, but that was a different regime, guys. That's not happening with Monty. Monty is not going to make that kind of move. If anything, the thing I wanted to almost bring up, I think we're getting closer right now. Like, when's the trade deadline? It feels like week 10,
next week, I think, is where it's going to be, and that's where it's just, we're getting to that spot where, like, I want, like, Zach Ertz, he's probably not going to get traded. He's on IR. There was questions of people said, hey, Hollywood's the guy who maybe is traded. I'm like, you're going to see him with Kyler is what I'd say, but you probably also are not going to say, hey, if you're going to take him off of that team and looking at what the comp picks would be or looking at re-signing him, you're probably going to need to at least start talking at, like, a late round 3 draft pick, because if he signs a big deal with a team that needs a receiver and then you get a compensatory 4th round pick, you're probably going to need to say, I need a little bit higher from that now, because otherwise I'll just keep him, use him with Kyler, because why not? It does you more good to have him on the roster. You'd have to give up a big enough pick, and I don't see a team biting on that level.
Yeah, no, but that's what's going to be interesting here in the next week here is with Monty and how much he values those picks. We saw it in this year's draft. When you mentioned the trading back, I mean, Monty likes stacking picks. So could we see a kind of a fire sale here, which would be really interesting just because of the timeline of Kyler Murray coming back?
Right.
Are you going to clear the cupboard for Kyler Murray and he's going to have like nothing to work with? Meaning, do you trade a James Conner? Do you trade an Ertz? Do you trade a Hollywood? I mean, it sounds like everything would be offensive that you'd be trading, but do you trade a Beecham? Do you trade, there's pieces that you can move on. A DJ Humphries, I've heard that name come up. Do you trade DJ? Those are guys that you could see be moved in the next week because we'd like to get some draft picks in the cupboard just to add into that arsenal that Monty has going into the next season.
Yeah, it's a war chest next season. They got like 8 picks in the first 3 rounds, I believe, which is like ridiculous. Now, they're all going to be rookies next year, so it's not going to be like an instant turnaround, but I do think that that's going to be one of the biggest storylines.
Look at how the rookies have played this year, though. For the most part, you've hit pretty well on your rookies.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
it's been Paris, and you've had some production, but it's not like you've had stars. Like, if you could tell me you could get 6 Paris Johnsons in next year at those draft picks, like, I think I'm sold on the team being able to compete for the playoffs. If it's like you got the Michael Wilson here, you get the BJ Ojolari here, who's playing, and just, he's on the field. He's not like he's bad where you can't start him, which is what we've seen with some Steve Keim draft picks before. But that's, I think, the biggest area is, like you said, I don't see this team saying we believe in Kyler Murray and then going and having a fire sale. That would seem to go against a lot of what they're preaching ultimately. And if they are one of giving him a real shot at proving he's the starter, then I think we see that. If they're feeling like, hey, we're going to bring him back, but we're going to be planning on moving on in a totally different direction, new regime, get our own guy, then I think you'd probably be hearing a lot more buzz about some of these guys, or you would see them actually deal these players away.
But do you guys actually
fun.
actually trust the Arizona Cardinals with what they're saying? Like, I feel like they lie to us all the time. So as much as it's like, oh yeah, we're not going to put Kyler Murray in that situation, they could have you've heard the rumors that there's an idea that they already know they're not going to keep Kyler Murray. I'm like on the fence there where I'm like, I don't believe it, but part of me is like, I kind of believe it. So I mean, but when you look at this year's draft, just to touch on that one last time, Garrett Williams last week showed signs of could be something, got that pick, looked pretty good. We've seen Michael Wilson look good at times. Would love to see him look good with Kyler. I mean, you've had guys hit. Keitrell Clark at times has looked serviceable.
He's been looking good.
Yeah,
not all the time, but he's actually for a 6th rounder.
Last week, yeah, he wasn't there last week, but again, you're starting a 6th round rookie. He was able to have some production, so we'll see where that goes. But it is one of those spots of, like you said, sorry, I got my dog yowling in the background. At least he wants to go out because we're already about 10 minutes past where I think we were going to be. You want to see at least that this organization is getting it right and not trusting the quarterback to save them, but that from a GM and coaching perspective, they're putting the players in a chance to succeed, not just letting the players have to be the ones to kind of lift them. And I think that's a good place for the Arizona Cardinals to be in.
We got to wrap. Your dog is not having it right now, boy.
I was gonna say, yeah, he's basically just like yowling. He wants to see Kyler back. Doesn't want the team to be able to lose anymore. So that will wrap it up for us, Tyler. Thanks so much for joining in. If you want to be able to let us know where we can find you, your work, and what else you've got going on with the Bird Gang Travel Club as well.
Oh yeah, we shameless plugs here at Bird Gang Travel on Instagram, Twitter, Bird Gang Travel Club, or birdgangtravel.com. Either one works. We are an Arizona Cardinal fan travel group. We go on the road to a couple games a year, full packages from your hotel to your game tickets to fun parties that are usually all you can eat, all you can drink, good times with your adult beverages or your non-adult beverages, whatever you'd like to do there. Tailgates, game tickets. We're doing Pittsburgh as our next big trip here coming up in December. Every person that bought a package with us is sitting row 5 or closer in the lower bowl. So, that's one of those cool experiences. One, you get to sit by other Cardinal fans on the road games, but you also get an up close experience as well. We don't sit anyone in the upper bowl or anything like that. So if you're going to make that trip across the road, we want you to sit in that kind of VIP experience. So we roll out those packages every year around the schedule release, which is right after they roll it out right after the draft. So it comes out usually the second week of May. So that's when you'll see packages roll out. It's not too late if you wanted to get in on Pittsburgh. We could get you in. Just go visit us at birdgangtravel.com and we can actually work out some payment plans and things like that. But that'll be it for this season. And then keep an eye on us for next season coming out right there when the schedule release comes out.
Absolutely. Hey, thank you so much for joining us. For Marcos Labrada, I'm Blake Murphy. My dog, as you can hear in the background, is Tripper. That'll be it for us here today. We're finished up now with the Redbird reboot, so it's time for us to log off. Thanks again for tuning in, and go Cards.